Hi, my name is Angus Iglesias and I'm going to be presenting today on routers. So what I have here are three different router devices that we're going to talk about and briefly cover. I also have a PowerPoint presentation describing different types of routers and the different modules that connect to those routers and exactly kind of what they do. I'm going to briefly cover that, not go into too much detail, but kind of explain what they are and how they work. The last thing that I'm going to cover is my network diagram here. And what this is going to show is how a router incorporates inside of an actual network. So, what is a router? And does everybody use routers? And what are the functions of an actual router itself? And what does it do? So what a router is a network. It's a network device that forwards data packets between computer networks, which performs traffic directory functions on the internet. Okay? So that's exactly what these routers here do. Excuse me. The first router that we're going to cover is the most common router that people have in their homes. This router here will supply them with, provide them with public internet service. Here's the wireless device. This wireless connection here will give off the wireless signal to the different devices throughout the household, and they connect them to the public internet. This right here, these ports right here are connected actually through a wire. This is the WAN port, Wide Area Network, and these yellow ports here are labeled as the Local Area Network ports. This is a connector for the coax, which will also provide internet service. On and off switch that you have, and the USB ports. The next router we're going to cover is a Cisco 1721 router. This Cisco router here has two wicks. What these wicks do is these wicks will connect to an actual T1 into each one. That's what they service. And then they'll provide either public internet service or OneNet service. And here you have a fast Ethernet port. You have a console port, which will then be able to configure the router, the command line. And then you have auxiliary port and the on and off switch as well. The last router that I have here is an Adtran 924. What this Adtran does is you have a power source, a craft port where you will go ahead and configure the router. You have an Ethernet port. You have two ports right here. One's labeled T101 and the other one's T102. T101 will connect the T1 itself, which will service and provide internet service or whatever voice service for the router. T102, that's also labeled DSX1. And what that port does is you could connect a PRI voice product or a SuperTrunk product. And in this module here, this is a voice port as well. You could connect a 25 pair Amphenol cable to it, which will then break off to pairs onto a 66 block, which will provide you with analog voice lines. And that covers the three different routers that I have here in person. Now with the PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to go ahead and go through it and kind of explain to you and briefly cover the routers I have here. The first slide shows different types of routers. I have a Juniper router, an Adtran router, Netgear router, and Cisco routers. The next slide is going to go over a Cisco 1941 router. Here you have the overview of the router. Right here you have the back portion of it. The two USB ports. You have two fast Ethernet ports. You have a console port, auxiliary port, and two different slots right here which you could connect the wicks. You have a power source and an on and off switch. The next Cisco we're going to cover is the Cisco 2911. This one has the overview right here, and then the back side of the Cisco. Now you have a lot more availability and ports to use a Cisco. You have gig ports, RJ45 gig ports. You have an SFP port, which you can connect fiber. Here's a bigger picture of an actual SFP that you would put inside the port. You have USB ports, auxiliary port, console ports, and you have 4 slots where you can connect the wicks to provide you service or additional internet ports. And then you also have a big slot right here which you can connect an EVM, which will give you voice service, and that covers the Cisco 2911. The next routers we're going to cover are the Adtran 900 series. You have two different types, the Adtran 908 and the Adtran 924. You also have a 908E, 924E. This back picture right here of the router will show you a 908E or a 924E. Now the difference between each one is this holds 8 FXS ports, 24 has the capability of holding 24 FXS ports. Now you have a picture of two different Ethernet ports on the back, a craft port, and then 4 different slots. You could use all 4 for T1s or 2 for T1s, and then you have these 2 last ones that are provide voice. You also have an FXO00 port for analog voice. And the last slide here is going to briefly cover on how you would configure the router using the console port. You have an RJ45 connector which goes to a DB9 adapter or a DB25 adapter. It all depends what kind of port you have on the back of your laptop. And then that covers my last slide of the PowerPoint presentation. So the last thing I'm going to cover here is a network diagram. And what this network diagram is going to show, it's going to show you the layout of a network, but it shows you how the router is incorporated. So it comes from the ISP, Internet Service Provider, down to the router. From the router, it goes to a wireless device, which will go off to the wireless other devices that connect to the internet. You then have a switch, another switch. This switch is going to service the PCs. This switch here will service other PCs with IP phones. And then this is connected to the server. Now within the router, you're going to go ahead and configure the routing protocols to connect to the different networks here that you have on this diagram. So that covers routers and my presentation. So that gives you a brief explanation of what routers do and then how they connect to the different parts of the network and the different capabilities that they have using the SFPs, the fiber, and the voice modules. And then so now we know how these routers will provide voice services, internet services, and for different companies and even through homes itself. That will conclude my presentation on routers. Thank you very much.